I always thought the beginning of the end would be something dramatic. A loud fight, a slammed door, a confession in tears. But it wasn't like that, not even close. The beginning of the end came with a single piece of laundry. Let me back up. Sarah and I had been married for 10 years. A full decade. That kind of time changes a marriage, softens it in some places, hardens it in others. We weren't newlyweds anymore, but we carved out a rhythm. She had her routines, I had mine. We had our shared things, the Sunday morning coffee runs, the old TV shows we rewatched every winter, the quiet understanding that sometimes silence was its own kind of love. It wasn't perfect, but I thought we were solid. I work from home, so I'm usually the one who handles the house stuff during the day. Dishes, groceries, walking the dog. Sometimes even laundry when I'm feeling particularly helpful or just need a break from the screen. That day was one of those days. I just finished a long call with a client who didn't know what they wanted but expected me to read their mind. I walked into the laundry room to swap a load from the washer to the dryer, and that's when I noticed it. A dress shirt. White. Sleek. Expensive-looking fabric, the kind you need cufflinks for. Not mine. Definitely not mine. At first, I assumed it was just some old shirt of mine I'd forgotten about, something buried deep in the back of the closet from a wedding or a work event. But when I picked it up, I knew. It smelled, not like detergent. Not like Sarah's usual lavender softener either. It smelled like someone else entirely. Like expensive cologne. Masculine, sharp, confident. And fresh like it had just been washed. Which it had. By us. In our machine. I stood there holding it in my hands for a full minute, trying to make it make sense. Then I heard her footsteps. Hey, babe. I called, keeping my tone even. Can I ask you something? She came around the corner, still dressed in her work-from-home clothes, leggings, oversized sweatshirt, her hair up in a loose knot. She looked like herself. Familiar. Safe. What's up? She asked, eyes flicking toward the dryer. I held up the shirt. Whose is this? Her reaction was quick, too quick. Her eyes locked on it for less than a second, and then she moved into the room like it was nothing, grabbing the laundry basket like it was a normal Tuesday evening. Oh, she said, casual. Too casual. That must have come from the dry cleaners. I must have grabbed the wrong bundle last time I went. I just looked at her. She didn't break stride. She pulled out some towels and started folding them on the counter like we weren't talking about a stranger's shirt sitting in our dryer. It happens sometimes, right? She added. Does it? I wanted to say. Does it happen to people like you? Because Sarah doesn't make mistakes like that. She's meticulous, organized to the point of obsession. I've seen her unwrap dry cleaning in the car just to double-check that everything is there before she even gets home. The idea that she somehow picked up another man's shirt, brought it home, washed it, and didn't notice? That didn't sound like the woman I married. But I didn't say that. Instead, I gave her a small nod. Weird, I muttered, folding the shirt and setting it aside. She didn't say anything else. Didn't offer to return it, didn't seem curious about who it belonged to. She just moved on to the next load like the subject was closed. And maybe for her it was. But not for me. Something about it, it stuck in my chest like a splinter. Not just the shirt itself, but the way she explained it. The quickness of the excuse, the lack of surprise, the avoidance in her eyes when I asked. That night, after she went to bed, I walked back into the laundry room and looked at the shirt again. I held it up to the light like I might find some secret written in the stitching. There was a small tag inside with a brand I didn't recognize, something European, probably. And faint, near the collar, a dry cleaning barcode. I looked it up online. It didn't trace back to anything helpful, but still, I kept staring at it like maybe it would tell me what I already feared. I thought about asking her again. Pressing her. But what was I going to say? You're lying about a shirt? It sounded ridiculous. Petty even. But the feeling in my gut wasn't. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying little things in my head. Nothing big, just moments that hadn't meant anything before. The days she got home late without much of an explanation. The way she'd been dressing lately, nicer, sharper, more deliberate. Her sudden interest in jogging again, even though she used to say she hated it. The fact that she'd started locking her phone even in the house. And now a man's shirt with a scent that lingered in our dryer like a stranger had been here. I'm not the jealous type. Really. But that night I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Doubt. I lay in bed next to her, watching her chest rise and fall in the dark. She looked peaceful. Untouched. Like someone without secrets. But for the first time I wasn't sure I believed that. I wanted to tell myself it was just one thing. A weird, explainable thing. But in my bones I knew it wasn't. It was the first ripple in what would become a flood. A crack in the glass I hadn't seen until the light hit it just right. The next morning everything was normal. Coffee, morning news, idle chat about weekend plans. Sarah acted like nothing had happened. Like the shirt never existed. I didn't bring it up. I just watched her. Noticed how her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. How she picked up her phone to text while turning slightly away from me. How she laughed a little too hard at nothing in particular. It all felt performed. The thing is, trust doesn't shatter all at once. It peels back in layers. You don't go from believing someone implicitly to suspecting them overnight. You collect evidence in your mind, tiny things that build up until you can't ignore them anymore. That shirt? That was Exhibit A. It was the first time I questioned whether I was really seeing my wife clearly or if I had been looking at a version of her I wanted to believe in. I didn't know then just how deep the cracks ran, but I knew they were there. And I wasn't about to look away. After the shirt incident, everything Sarah did started to feel off. Not in the obvious way, not like she was stumbling over herself to cover a lie, but more like someone quietly adjusting the picture frames on a wall while hoping you wouldn't notice. But I did. I noticed everything. Maybe the shirt had planted a seed in my mind, but that seed took root fast. It was like once you see one crack in the glass, you start to see the whole thing shatter. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, not overnight, but gradually, like a slow fade you only recognize when it's too late. I started paying closer attention. Not obsessively at first. Just aware. Sarah had always been career-driven, and I respected that. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, and it wasn't unusual for her to come home tired or preoccupied. But lately, the hours had gotten longer. She started mentioning meetings that went into the evening. Weekend conferences. Emergency client dinners. And they always seemed to pop up last minute. The first time I noticed something odd, she told me she had a work meeting on a Saturday morning. A strategy session at a hotel lounge downtown. She said it like it was no big deal, like this was just how business worked these days. But something about it felt rehearsed, like a line read too many times in front of a mirror. Want me to drop you off? I'd asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled. Nah, I'll just take an Uber. I might be there a while. I nodded, but the wheels were already turning. She left in a navy dress and heels. Not inappropriate, but not casual either. Lipstick. Perfume. Hair perfectly blown out. For a meeting. When she came home later that day, she was quiet. Tired, she said. I asked how it went. She said fine. Just a lot of talking. And that was it. No names. No details. Just vague. After that, I started keeping track. Not in a notebook or anything crazy, but mentally. Her absences, the sudden changes in her schedule, the shift in her energy when I asked harmless questions. She was still present, still smiling, still making dinner sometimes, still initiating conversations about Netflix shows we hadn't finished, but something was missing. Something was withheld. Her phone became a fortress. Always face down on the table. Always on silent. Once while we were watching TV, it buzzed and she practically leapt to flip it over. Just work, she said, without me even asking. The next day, she changed her phone password. That hit harder than I expected. We'd always been open about that stuff, not that we snooped, but the idea was, if there was nothing to hide, there was nothing to guard. Now suddenly, her phone was locked tighter than Fort Knox, and I wasn't given a key. I started noticing how she'd take calls in the bedroom with the door closed, claiming it was too noisy in the kitchen even when the house was silent. Sometimes I'd pass by and hear her whispering, low and soft. Once I heard her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in a long time, not at something I said, but something someone else said. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Work was stressful. She was dealing with demanding clients. She was trying to unwind. But the more I pushed those excuses, the more fake they felt. I wasn't crazy. I was observant. Her wardrobe changed too. Gradually. The cozy sweaters and old jeans she used to love gave way to bolder outfits, fitted dresses, high heels, brighter lipstick. She dyed her hair too. A lighter color, a little edgy. She told me it was part of a reboot, a fresh start for her 30s. I just want to feel good about myself again, she said one evening as she showed off the new cut. Is that so bad? Of course not. On the surface, it made sense. People change. Styles evolve. But this wasn't evolution, it was a rebranding. A curated image for a new audience. One that didn't include me. I started noticing the smallest changes. The way she'd glance at her reflection in the window when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she smiled at her phone, not the half-smile she gave me, but the real one. The one I used to be the reason for. I felt like I was watching her from the outside of a glass box. She was still there, but unreachable. Unreadable. And I had no idea how to break through. I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready. I kept telling myself I needed more than hunches. More than subtle shifts and locked screens and lingering perfume. I needed something concrete, something I couldn't explain away in the quiet hours when doubt made me feel like the villain in my own story. So I waited. I watched. I kept pretending everything was normal while quietly cataloging every inconsistency. And there were plenty. She stopped mentioning coworkers by name. Stopped bringing home funny stories from the office. Our dinner conversations became shallower, surface-level check-ins and updates without any of the depth we used to have. If I asked about her day, she'd keep it vague. Busy. Exhausting. The usual. But it didn't feel like the usual. It felt like a performance. And through it all, I kept circling back to that damn shirt. The way it showed up all out of place, reeking of someone I'd never met. It was like the universe had dropped a clue in my lap and dared me to ignore it. I couldn't anymore. I started staying up later. Watching her when she thought I was asleep. Listening. Once I saw her texting someone at 1 a.m., her face lit up by the soft glow of her screen. When she noticed me stir, she put it down so fast you'd think it burned her. I didn't say anything, but my chest felt like it was caving in. I wanted to be wrong. I really did. I wanted this to be a phase, a stress response, a rough patch, a miscommunication. I didn't want to be the guy whose wife was slipping away, slowly and quietly, into someone else's world. But that's exactly who I was becoming. And the worst part? She didn't even seem to notice. About a month after the shirt incident, Sarah invited me to something she called a company summer retreat. That was her exact phrase. She described it like a light social mixer, something casual, outdoorsy, a little wine and team-building stuff at some rustic countryside restaurant her department had rented for the evening. You should come, she said, casually dropping the invitation into our dinner conversation like it was no big deal. It's just my team and a few of the higher-ups. You'll finally get to meet Mr. Klein. I hadn't heard much about Mr. Klein before then, just a couple mentions here and there. Her new boss, apparently. Regional director. According to her, he was intense but brilliant, the kind of guy who could read a room in seconds and didn't suffer fools. I got the impression she respected him. Or feared him. Or something else. I'd love to meet him, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. And I meant that. I wanted to see her world. To meet the people she spent all those late nights with. To put names to faces. Maybe confirm or disprove the suspicions gnawing at my gut every time she said she was working late. So we went. It was a warm evening, the kind where the air clings to your skin but not uncomfortably. The restaurant was a beautiful old place tucked away about 40 minutes from the city, stone patio, twinkle lights wrapped around oak trees, strings of soft jazz playing through outdoor speakers. Everyone there was dressed to the nines, but in that effortless, curated way that suggested this wasn't their first time hosting something like this. Sarah looked stunning, too stunning if I'm honest. A form-fitting navy dress, subtle but expensive perfume, and makeup that had clearly taken time. She looked like she belonged there. I, on the other hand, felt like a tourist. As soon as we arrived, she slipped into social mode, introducing me quickly to a few coworkers whose names I forgot instantly. She held my hand for the first few minutes, but then someone waved her over, and she excused herself with a practiced smile and a "go grab a drink, babe, I'll be right back." She wasn't. I milled around awkwardly, sipping a cocktail I couldn't pronounce, watching her weave through the crowd with that electric charisma I hadn't seen in a while. She looked alive here. Engaged. At home. I caught glimpses of her laughing, gesturing, leaning in when someone spoke. But never with me. Eventually, a small group gathered near the center patio where a man with slicked-back hair and a glass of wine stood poised like a performer. He raised his hand and smiled. "All right, folks," he announced, "before the food makes us all too lazy to socialize, a quick toast." People quieted. Sarah was right near him, standing just behind and to the side, close, but not touching. Too close. "This has been a phenomenal quarter," the man said, his voice smooth and self-assured. "Our numbers are up, our ideas are sharper than ever, and morale, well, it could use work, but we'll get there." The crowd chuckled. "But seriously," he continued, "I want to raise a glass to the unsung heroes, the people who do the work behind the curtain and the ones who support them at home." A few heads turned toward me. I shifted uncomfortably. To the husbands who work from home and don't notice their wives climbing the ladder with upper management. Laughter erupted. It was loud and immediate. Except for me. I froze. The words hit like a**ker punch, followed by the sting of realization as everyone looked away awkwardly, realizing too late that the joke wasn't just inappropriate. It was pointed. I looked at Sarah. She laughed too. Not loudly, but enough. And when she caught my eye across the patio, her expression flickered. Guilt? Panic? I couldn't tell. The man, Mr. Klein, grinned and raised his glass toward me. All in good fun, right? I forced a smile. Nodded. Swallowed the heat rising in my chest. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of noise and tension. I couldn't focus. I couldn't breathe. The toast kept playing in my mind, looping over and over like an audio glitch. I told myself I was overreacting. That it was just a joke. But I knew better. And then came the final confirmation. Later that night, after most of the guests had filtered out and the staff began clearing wine glasses, I found myself alone on the patio near the back veranda, a glass structure with tall windows overlooking the garden. It was dimly lit, quiet. I needed a moment to collect myself. That's when I saw them. Sarah and Mr. Klein. Through the glass. They were standing close. Closer than coworkers. Her hand rested lightly on his chest. His fingers grazed the back of her arm. And then, as clearly as I'm writing this now, I watched her lean in and kiss him. Not a cheek kiss. Not a friendly goodbye. A real kiss. The kind you save for someone who owns a piece of you. I didn't move. Didn't storm in. I just stood there, staring, frozen in place. Watching my wife of 10 years kiss her boss like I didn't exist. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not all at once, there wasn't some cinematic shatter. It was quieter than that. Like the slow crack of ice under pressure. Like my trust had been dying for weeks and had finally given up. I didn't say anything when she came back outside. She smiled, asked if I was ready to go. I said yes. My voice didn't tremble. My hands didn't shake. I drove us home in silence. She didn't notice. Or maybe she did. Maybe she was counting on it. The next morning, I woke up early. Earlier than usual. I watched her sleep for a while, trying to understand the woman lying beside me. Trying to square the version of her in my head with the one I saw behind that glass. I couldn't. She stirred eventually, rolled over, and smiled at me. Like nothing had happened. Like the world was still spinning in the same direction. I kissed her forehead and told her I needed to catch up on work. Then I walked into my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I planned. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even the day after that. Instead, I locked myself in my office and began a quiet descent into obsession. The kind of obsession that doesn't come with yelling or broken dishes, it comes with spreadsheets, timestamps, **TS, and late nights poring over call logs until your eyes blur and your heart forgets how to beat normally. That was my version of collapse. Not loud, not chaotic, just cold, methodical, almost surgical. It started with the bank statements. I hadn't looked at them closely in months, years, really. We had a system. Sarah paid the bills, I handled the mortgage and savings. It worked. But that morning, as I sipped cold coffee with her still asleep upstairs, I pulled up our shared accounts and started combing through every line. The first thing I noticed were the restaurant charges. Not chain restaurants, not places we ever went together, but sleek, upscale places. Names I recognized from articles about best date spots downtown. One of them had a rooftop lounge I'd always wanted to try, but Sarah said it was too expensive. Apparently, it wasn't too expensive for someone else. Then there were the salon visits. Not unusual by themselves, Sarah liked taking care of herself. But the frequency had doubled. Appointments every other week. High-end spas. One receipt was for something called a couples aromatherapy massage, booked on a Friday afternoon when she was supposedly in back-to-back meetings. I started cross-referencing dates. Every salon appointment lined up with a day she'd come home glowing and relaxed. Every fancy dinner matched a night she told me she was too tired to eat. It got worse. Next, I requested the call log. Technically, it was a shared phone plan, so I had access. I had never checked it before. I felt sick doing it, like I was betraying something, but I reminded myself she'd already broken the contract. The log showed one number appearing again and again. Not saved in her contacts, not labeled. Just a string of digits, long, late-night calls, sometimes up to 45 minutes. Always after I went to bed. And always on the days she was working late. I copied the number and Googled it. Nothing at first. No listings, no business tied to it. Just a generic wireless provider. But I saved it. I knew I'd find more. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Her excuses. Her smile. The way she kissed him behind that glass, like it meant nothing. Or maybe it meant everything. At 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and searched private investigator near me. His name was Darren. 50-something, ex-law enforcement, the kind of guy who didn't ask a lot of questions once he saw the look on your face. I met him in a booth at a diner 2 towns over. He wore a windbreaker and kept his sunglasses on the table next to his coffee. You want photos, timestamps, who, where, how often, he said. That right? I nodded. Can do, he said, already reaching for his notepad. Need her license plate, typical schedule, any places you suspect. The more routine she is, the faster I get what you need. I handed him a file I'd prepared. I had gone through our calendar, written down addresses, printed her work schedule from an old email she forwarded me months ago. I felt like a man plotting a heist. Or a war. Just tell me one thing, I said before he left. If this turns out to be what I think it is, how do people usually react? He looked at me, expression unreadable. Then he said they break. For a while. Then they get up. He slid out of the booth and was gone. For the next few days, I functioned like a ghost. I worked from home, pretended everything was normal, kissed Sarah on the cheek when she left in the morning. She didn't notice the difference. Or maybe she was too wrapped up in her own secret life to care. Each night, I sat in my office waiting for updates. Darren was thorough, texts, emails, brief summaries of tailings. He didn't share photos until he had confirmation, but the language was clear. Subject met with same individual at cafe on Elm Street. Sat close. Hand contact observed. Duration, 1 hour 17 minutes. Subject entered hotel lobby at 3:41 p.m. with mail. Same mail observed in earlier encounters. Both exited at 6:18 p.m. appeared physically affectionate. Each line chipped away at the version of my life I thought I was living. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just got sharper. I opened a folder on my desktop and labeled it contingency. Inside, I saved PDFs of our bank statements. Screenshot *TS of her texts with vague explanations. Notes of conversations we had where she lied about her location. I created a timeline, every appointment, every meeting, every evening she said she was at work but wasn't. I wasn't collecting this for court. I was collecting it for clarity. So that when the time came and she tried to rewrite history, I'd have the receipts. After 5 days, Darren called. I've got it, he said. Photos, receipts, even video. You want a flash drive or paper? Both, I said. When we met again, this time in a parking lot behind a gas station, he handed me an envelope and a small USB drive. She's sloppy, he said bluntly. You're not crazy. You were right. I nodded, tucked the envelope into my jacket, and walked back to my car. I didn't look at it right away. I drove to the coast instead. Sat in my car with the windows down, the ocean just visible beyond a stretch of trees. I listened to the wind for a long time before I opened the folder. Inside were photos of my wife. With him. At a boutique hotel. At a restaurant I'd never been to. Walking down a quiet alley near his apartment. Arms touching. Faces close. In one photo, she was laughing. In another, she had her hand tucked into the crook of his arm like they were newlyweds. There was no mistaking it. No more gray area. No room for excuses or blurred lines or emotional confusion. This wasn't a flotation. It wasn't a mistake. It was a life. One she built behind my back. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my car, holding the folder, and I made a decision not to scream, not to cry, not to demand answers she'd twist into something unrecognizable. I wasn't going to beg her to explain a story I already knew. I was going to end it on my terms. No drama. No shouting. Just consequences. I always thought revenge would feel like fire, hot, explosive, blinding. But when the time came, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt cold. Focused. Like I was performing a long-delayed surgery on something rotten. I wasn't angry anymore, not the way I had been. I was precise. After Darren gave me the file, I went home and scanned every page like a detective at the end of a noir film. Photos, timestamps, credit card receipts from boutique hotels downtown. Even a *T of them sitting close together in a quiet corner of the lobby bar. Her head rested lightly against his shoulder like she belonged there. The man's name was Martin Klein. Mr. Klein. Her boss. And as it turned out, he had a history. Darren had dug deeper, far deeper than I'd asked him to. He found old HR documents from a previous company Klein had worked for. They weren't easy to get, but Darren had contacts. 3 separate harassment complaints filed over a 2-year span. None of them made it past internal review. All were settled quietly. The women were transferred to other departments. Klein got promoted. I stared at that file for hours, absorbing every sentence. He was careful, but not invincible. I printed copies of everything, his meetings with Sarah, the evidence of their relationship, the documentation of prior complaints. I organized it into 3 identical manila envelopes. The first envelope was addressed to the legal and compliance department of Sarah's company. The second was for Klein's wife. Her name was Anna. She was on Facebook, easy to find, and judging by her profile, blissfully unaware of the double life her husband had been leading. She had a gardening blog, a golden retriever named Max, and a recent anniversary post filled with photos of a beach vacation Klein had taken with her just 3 weeks ago. I guess he liked playing both roles, the loving husband and the office predator. The third envelope was for me. Just a reminder. A safeguard in case I ever questioned whether I'd imagined the whole thing. It was surreal, sealing them up, labeling them like they were part of a business transaction. But that's what this had become, a calculated response to calculated betrayal. I didn't rush it. I mailed Anna's envelope from a different town the next day just to be safe. No return address, just the truth wrapped in plain paper. The envelope for the company I dropped off in person. I walked into the lobby dressed in neutral colors, a ball cap low over my eyes. Told the receptionist I was delivering documents for legal. She didn't even blink. Took the envelope, thanked me, and placed it in the outgoing bin. No fanfare. No alarms. Just a quiet bomb waiting to go off. Then I waited. A week passed. Sarah didn't notice a thing. She went about her days like everything was fine. She even suggested we take a trip to reconnect. I almost laughed. Her timing was impeccable, offering to heal the marriage she'd already replaced. I said I'd think about it. In the meantime, I focused on my routine. I walked the dog. I kept working. I stayed out of her way. Then, one Thursday morning, the cracks finally surfaced. She came home from work late. That wasn't unusual. But her face was pale, drawn. She didn't say much during dinner, just pushed her food around her plate and stared into the middle distance like she was watching her life unravel in slow motion. After we ate, she stood at the sink, dish in hand, and said, "Something weird happened at work today." I didn't look up. "Weird how?" She hesitated. "Klein, he's been put on temporary leave. They said it's a pending investigation." I let the silence hang between us. She looked at me. "Do you know anything about this?" I looked her in the eye. "Should I?" Her mouth opened like she was going to say something, but then it closed. She gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "No. I thought maybe." That was all she said. She didn't ask again. I think a part of her knew. Maybe not the full extent, but enough. Enough to feel the edges closing in. The next morning, I placed the divorce papers on the dining table. Neatly stacked. My wedding ring resting on top. I didn't say a word when she came down and saw them. She stood there frozen, staring at the documents like they were written in a language she couldn't understand. "Jacob," she whispered. I didn't respond. She reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "Please," she said. "Can we talk about this?" "We've been talking," I said quietly. "You just haven't been listening." Tears welled in her eyes. She grabbed a chair and sat down slowly, like her body no longer trusted itself. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said. "It was, I don't know, an emotional crisis. I felt lost, and he took advantage. That's what he does. Ask anyone." I stared at her. "You kissed him," I said flatly. "You went to hotels with him. You lied to me for months. That's not a crisis, Sarah. That's a choice." She opened her mouth. Closed it. The tears started falling for real now. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But Jacob, I don't want to lose you." "You already did." I stood up, picked up my coffee mug, and walked out of the room. Behind me, she didn't move. She just sat there, silent. Maybe for the first time, she understood what she had done, not just to me, but to the version of herself that used to live in this house. The woman who promised to be honest, loyal, true. That woman was gone. Replaced by someone else. And I was done waiting for her to come back.